Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Philip Foster, and I wanted to welcome you to our biweekly blab on all things leadership. Today, we get to talk about my favorite subject, the open organization. I'm actually going to step back here in a moment and become the presenter of information. So at this time, I just want to go ahead and have everyone introduce themselves, and then I'll take the back seat and I'll let Dr. LaTanya Hughes, and Dr. Karen Bolzer lead this discussion. So if you guys want to go ahead and get started, introduce yourself, and we'll go from there.
Awesome. Good morning. I'm Dr. LaTanya Hughes. I'm the authority in global business dynamics. I pretty much focus on coaching and mentoring people to effectively influence society or other people to flourish, prosper, and uphold moral character. I really like innovative ideas like the open organization because it allows more room for flexibility and for different types of leadership roles and leadership styles. So I'm pretty excited to hear more about, Dr. Foster's concept, how he came about, this whole idea of the open organization. So awesome.
Okay, I am Dr. Karen Bolzer. I am the CEO of the Bolzer Group, LLC. My specialties are executive coaching, as well as personal coaching and consulting. I love leadership. I love Dr. Foster's book, The Open Organization, and I'm excited to probe his mind and his thoughts, why he decided to write the book, who it's for, and how we can use it in our everyday organizations.
And my name is Dr. Philip Foster. I am a thought leader when it comes to organizations of the 21st century and the future of work. And my expertise lies in leadership and strategic foresight and strategy. So I'm very happy to be here today and to be the kind of the focus of this discussion. So I'll turn this over to Dr. Hughes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. So again, we're pretty excited about learning more about the open organization. If you don't know what the book looks like, this is what it looks like. I kind of earmark where I am. I'm reading like 3 books at one time now, but I really love what I've read so far, and I can't wait to hear more. So let's go ahead and dive into today's topic. And I'm going to ask some questions. Dr. Clark couldn't be with us today. He had a conflict in his schedule, so he sent some questions that he really wants to know. He's read the book and he's really, really excited. But one of the questions he wants to know is why it's so hard for some leaders to be open in their leadership and cede control to followers who are competent in critical areas of the organization.
That is a really complex question.
I think Dr. Foster just froze up on us.
And a historical, thread of how we got to where we are today. But there's a lot of
Blab is not loving Dr. Foster today. Why? As soon as we get into our topic, he's gone. Dr. Foster is gone. Uh-oh. I think, hold on, he's gonna hopefully call back in a second.
Yeah.
Don't you just love when we have these moments where we're in the middle of a great conversation?
Here he is. He's calling
you gotta love technology. Thank you, B. Moore. One of our visitors told me I need to refresh. Okay, so I don't know what you heard, so I'm just going to start over. How about that? My screen just went blank. Right. So basically, to answer your question or to answer William's question, we have to understand the history of leadership, how we got to where we are today from where we came from. And so that's why I opened the book with a kind of a historical or maybe we would look at that more from the educational standpoint and the theory standpoint, but we have to understand where we came from. And from the very earliest of times, we defaulted to what I call the great man theory, or what is called the great man theory, rather, but I call it Organization 1.0. And that is really where it is understood that there is one person in charge. They are all knowing, they're the expert, and that everyone must bow to them, answer to them, and do what they say. So it's that pyramid, top-down hierarchy that we're used to. Here's the problem. That's the way we teach or have taught in the past, business school-wise. That's how we have taught leadership. And we call it management at that point, but it's still a leadership style of top-down. And honestly, we have developed our organizations to act as such. And really, this is born out of an 18th century, going into the 19th century with Frederick Taylor's scientific method, and how do we better operate efficiencies in an organization.
Dr. Bolzer, you want to tune in real quick?
Yes, I just a question for you, Philip. How have you applied the open organization to your own organization that you're running? And what are some of the key points or qualities that you try to use with that flexibility and style in an open organization?
Well, I would say that to understand open organization, you have to understand what it is in order to know how I do what I do. An open organization is a style of leading where you're empowering other people to get work done. It also does not necessarily involve a traditional style organization. What I mean by that is that it doesn't necessarily mean you go to a physical headquarters every day and do your job. An open organization could also be a dispersed tool or mechanism or structure, if you want to call it that. And so open is not a structure in the sense of what we think scholastically a structure is. So let me just, from that point, let me just answer your question. The way that I work is on a distributed model of open. And what that means is I work from wherever I want to, when I need to. It's mostly done through chat. WhatsApp is an app that I use. I use a lot of video conferencing and a lot of email. So there's a lot of that going on. The way that I work from an open sense is constant communication with colleagues that I'm working with. We're doing a lot of collaboration, and that happens in many different ways. It could happen via video like we're doing today. And in some ways, what we're doing today is considered collaboration. I know I've worked on some projects with Dr. Hughes where we're going back and forth in email. And so we do that. And I actually work with some colleagues in the Middle East and North Africa, and we do a lot of that through WhatsApp and some other methods. So for me, the way that I operate from open is more from the communication style, the empowerment style, the collaboration style. And there's a piece to it that is very much a nuance to open. That's celebrating happiness. And so when I am working with someone and they do a job well done, I want to get in there and celebrate with them. So the other day, I finished up a project with my colleagues in Middle East and North Africa. We're getting ready to do a project next week. And I just sent the team lead that was working with me a little voice note through WhatsApp. And I said, thank you so much for your hard work. Your work was excellent. I really appreciate you putting up with my edits. And so I was celebrating with them, and I was trying to instill in them a sense of happiness in what they did, pride in what they did, and also showing them that I recognize the ownership of what they did.
Awesome.
Okay. So I see that communication is a big part of the open organization. What if an organization's communication skills are lacking? Can they just automatically jump into that flexibility where we're communicating through email, chat, or is there a little bit of prep work that needs to be done beforehand to make sure the communication is on point?
First of all, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all organization. The best way that I know how to approach this is to ask, what is the organization's culture? If the organization's culture does not celebrate openness in communication, in other words, they have people that hold closely information to them, and they're what I call information hoarders. And that happens at all levels. They're protecting their fiefdom, their silo. If that's the culture of the organization, it will take a long time for them to bridge over the gap into more of an open setting, because you have to change the culture and mindset of that organization. And if you don't do it from the very top to the very bottom, from the left to the right, however you envision that organization, you're going to have a real hard time with this. So I would say that an organization that wants to go open has to understand what's really involved in it. There is a price to pay in moving toward openness. You don't have to just say, oh, here's the flavor of the week. Here's a great book. We're going to do this tomorrow. This is a template for a 21st century organization, but it's not a one size fits all. Right. In other words, you have to take what is in here and say, how does this apply to my culture? Mm-hmm. And then you have to build the future culture around what's important to you and your organization. And that doesn't mean you as the leader find the importance in that. It may also be what the rank and file or the followers in the organization, believe is important. And sometimes what the leader believes is important and what the followers believe to be important are two different things.
Right. I want to address a question here that B. Moore has here. The question is, does this style include pay based on project or task completion, or the traditional hourly rate?
Yes. The best answer is it depends, B. Moore. If you're a contractor, so you're what I call a freelancer. Mm-hmm. It may very much be paid based on project or task completion. If you are part of the organization, it's probably more of a salary based. Very few times do I see it based on hourly, unless you're considering hourly to be part of the project task based. So you're paying for a project based on 10 hours of work. So that's an hourly rate. Sometimes we go into a task or a project and we say, we're going to pay a flat rate to you for doing this task or project, and you agree to it. And so really the answer is it depends. It depends on what's important to the freelancer or the individual doing the work, the stakeholder of that piece of the project. Or it also depends on the organization and how they wish to pay for that and who they're involving in that project, whether it be a freelancer or someone within the organization.
And I want to chime in on that too. I think sometimes when we think about the hourly rate, we don't understand that when companies say this is how much we're going to pay for a project, or this is how much we have allotted for this particular task or venture that we're doing, that's already calculated because they consider that as labor or some type of, it's not necessarily a fixed cost, but it's something that they've already calculated and considered and put into it. So if you want to break it down in terms of an hourly rate, you can, but the terminology, I suppose, that people use when you get to certain points, particularly as an independent contractor or, freelance or freelance person, when you start getting into certain aspects of business, things aren't always in terms of an hourly rate. It's based on the project. And so when you determine, for instance, we're all consultants, and so we don't really say, this is my hourly rate. What we say is based on, say somebody decides, hey, we want you to come and do a 1-hour lecture. What's your fee? We calculate whatever our fee is based on how much time, and it's not based on how much time just for that 1 hour, but how much time it's going to take us to prep for that 1 hour speech, travel, all of these different expenses. And then we say, this is my fee, excluding travel with travel. So that way it's already simple. We don't have to worry about this is my hourly rate. Then they have to figure out what that turns into. You just say what it is. Now, if it's a consulting project, now for me to come in and do an assessment, rather than say I charge $350 an hour for a minimum of 4 hours, why can't I just say it's $1,750, $800, whatever it is, for that time to come and do an assessment, and then say, if you want me to do implementation of these recommendations based off of this assessment, this is what I can send you a contract, I can send you an agreement, and it will break down what it entails based on, I'm going to do 4 hours of this right here. I'm going to do 8 hours of this right here for a total of 32 hours. And this is how much 32 hours of work is going to entail. So it really depends on the project and what you're doing. But some, and particularly when you're dealing with international clients, a lot of times they don't care what the hourly rate is. They just want to know, what is the fee? What is it going to cost me? So it really, like Dr. Farr said, it really depends. It's just a matter of, I think it just boils down to terminology.
Right.
Dr. Foster.
And if I could just touch on that and be more, is actually ask some questions that specifically the geographical setup, effective communications. Here's the thing. Terminology right now is really difficult when it comes to the sense of open organization. When I look at an open organization, I don't look at an organization that's so much different as it is the same. And here's what I mean by that. An open organization requires structure. The old school organization requires structure. The question is, how do we use that structure is different. So we're more open, we're more sharing, we're more empowering, we're providing more. And here's the other thing. I noticed there was something about the communication style. There are organizations that are open that have traditional office settings, and then they have distributed, I call them hybrid distributed companies. When they are operating that way, and they have a meeting, many times the individuals that are in the company, even if they're in the same building, they get on to chat, they get onto the video conferencing. Even though they're in the same building, they're in their office or they're in their workspace, and they're live or they're chatting or working collaboratively. So it's not, we have to be careful when we're using terminology that we get stuck in this idea that there's somehow this huge difference in how we run an organization. It's not a huge difference if we take off the blinders and realize that it's just doing the things that work better and work within the culture of the organization. The other thing is be more asked about tracking hours. If everyone's in a different location, how does that work? Really, that is up to what I call a knowledge commons. How do we track work? And if you're dealing with freelancers, they're many times sending you a bill or something. But it's what is your form of structure electronically that you use to share information and track that information, and we call it knowledge commons. Some organizations use a program called Slack. There's Fire Chat. There's 37 Signals. There's all these different tools out there. All you have to do is do a search on these, collaborative tools, and you're going to find literally dozens of them. And so, we have to stop thinking that this is a us and them, because really the biggest hurdle to open in my mind is how we perceive open as leaders. If we perceive open as a tool to be more efficient and effective and to get information and ideas and products to market more quickly and create happiness amongst our customers, then it's a really good tool. If we see open as a threat to our ability to lead, then we're not going to like it. It's all a mindset. And I would just leave this last comment on that. If you are running an organization through the fear that someone is going to bump you out of your spot as a leader, you're leading wrong. Right. In my mind, the best way to lead is to lead pulling people up to you, bringing them with you. If you're not creating that sense of working yourself out of a job, you're doing it wrong.
Right.
Honestly.
That's right.
I know that's counterintuitive to the way we lead today.
Right. I think that's a good segue into Dr. Clark's next question. He wanted you to talk more about the cerebral economy of knowledge workers. his question was, how do knowledge workers leverage their knowledge and skills to influence the organization to make a decision or go into a specific direction?
So there's two sides to this equation, obviously. The organization has to value the knowledge worker in order for the knowledge worker to have that authority to move the organization. If the organization does not give the knowledge worker that authority, then they're just a regular old drone worker. Okay, they're not doing the things that they've been hired to do. They're just a robot or an automaton, as I like to call them. So the cerebral economy, the cerebral worker, the knowledge worker, is someone who comes to the organization with a skill set. Now, we could look at each one of us here, and we all have overlap in our skill set. And a cerebral worker or a knowledge worker will have overlap with other people. But it's what they can do in the specific is the reason why we hire them. Someone would hire me because I'm a futurist. I'm a strategist. I'm looking at the what if of the future. Right now, I'm talking about the future of work in the 21st century organization and how we move into that. So someone might hire me to help them navigate that. They might hire you, Dr. Hughes, for something else, or Dr. Bolzer, and they might hire you to maybe do something else. But we all have that similar overlap. So a knowledge worker is someone that brings specific skills in, but here's the key to it. In the future, a knowledge worker will have a huge skill set of a generalist because we will all be able to do certain things in an overlapping format. And we may even have similar skill sets that are in the specific, like there may be 2 or 3 strategists in the group. But what makes us different is that we're using, the organization's using, and we're using our knowledge and our abilities to create solutions to move the organization forward.
The one thing I like about the open organization and what you described going into the future for organizations is, as a leader, you cannot just hire based on skill sets anymore. That doesn't work because you're limiting the growth of your organization or company and your goals. And so when I personally look to hire someone, not only am I looking for skill set, but am I able to groom this person, and are they able to learn new skills and traits? Are they flexible? And so in the 21st century, organizations are changing their mindset of how they look at people and their skill set. It's more of, who is this? How can this person develop? And how can they benefit me in the future? Right. And so it's not looking at a plain resume anymore. She knows how to type 60 words per minute. She knows how to use Excel. She's great at project management. But what can those skills develop into? And how can we groom her? And is this a fit for our organization? And so I believe that the open organization allows leaders to look beyond what the person currently has and what they can become in the future. And that's what I like about your book.
If I could just say something about that for a minute, I think one of the biggest challenges that organizations face in the very near future, and when I say near future, I'm talking 5, 10, 15 years out, is the skills gap that's coming. And I think this is why knowledge workers that are in play today and have specific skill sets, and whether it be you have a master's or a doctorate, or you're highly sought after as a programmer or an orator or whatever it is, you're ahead of the curve already. But the problem is we have this growing skills gap. And right now I'm in a dialogue with colleagues. Dr. Hughes is one of them. We're talking about some of the challenges that are in play right now when it comes to diversity. And I think that, the open organization is a solution that can be used to deal with the problems of diversity in this country, to deal with problems with pay diversity, or, there's a difference in pay between men and women and minorities. And so the open organization, I think, really starts to pull together some fundamental attributes that bring us together for a collective reason. Now, I am not a socialist. I am not a utopist. I mean, obviously, we all want a better society. So I am in no way abdicating or not abdicating, but, asking for something that is not, accepted by a lot of different people. What I'm saying is that we have to put aside things that are powerful to ourselves so that we can create a powerfulness for the society in the world. You know, and the other day I quoted, we're not black, we're not white, we're not Christian, we're not Muslim, we're not Jewish or Gentile. You know, we are brothers and sisters, we're related, we are a part of the human race. And I really think that the open organization draws us closer to that. But here's the problem that the organizations are facing. With all that being said, we still have this skills gap that's growing. And how do we deal with that? There's people coming into the workforce that aren't able to operate at the levels that this economy, this knowledge economy, is starting to demand of us. We need skilled workers. We need workers that are skilled technology-wise and the ability to do things that are not manual labor anymore. We're now in a cerebral labor market where we're creating ideas that create solutions. We need people that are going to be able to fix robots. And I believe we're in a future where we are maker society, where we're going to actually make most of our products from our desktop printer, a 3D printer, or we'll go down to the hardware store and pick up something we ordered that needed to be printed on an industrial size, 3D printer or something. We need people that can operate those machines, that understand chemistry so they could create new resins and polymers and things. This is why I see this skills gap happening, because we don't have enough people entering the market. I'm a adjunct professor, and I've been doing this for 5 years now. And I can tell you the students that are coming into the education system and the higher ed side, they don't even know the fundamentals of writing, much less communicating. There is a huge problem coming that has to be dealt with at all levels, from education to parental to government to industry. It's not, we can't point our finger at one place and say, you're the fault of this. It's a societal problem that we got to deal with. Now, all of that to say, if we don't deal with this skills gap, we're in trouble. That's
good. You've covered a lot of the other two questions I have, and maybe we'll double back. And I know you're on a tight schedule today. No, that's fine. I want to talk about the open organization as it relates to multinational corporations. We're in a global society right now, particularly in the marketplace. Due to technology, we have more access to products and services more than in many years past. So for multinational corporations, how would an open organization work?
So if you're truly open, you stop using terms like multinational companies. And I get where you're coming from. I'm not meaning to douse that. I'm just saying that we have to think differently when it comes to that. Because an open organization, a distributed organization, doesn't belong to the US, doesn't belong to the Netherlands, doesn't belong to Egypt, or wherever you decide to put it. It belongs to the individuals working in that position, in that geographical space. And so I think that it works the same, but here's the rub. The rub is that we have to have a cultural literacy that we don't have right now. And I would argue that some Americans, or the West specifically, are starting to figure this out. The Europeans, I think, have it figured out the best because they live in such close proximity to so many different cultural differences there. I mean, Europe is a big area, but when you start breaking it down into countries, you could be in one country for breakfast, another country for lunch, and then a third country for dinner. Right. And you drove there. Right. And so, I think that maybe Europe has got this figured out maybe a little bit better than Americans do. Right. But we have to have a cultural understanding, a cultural literacy. We have to understand that when you go to, let's say, an Asian market, you have to ask for things in a different way than you might do, let's say, in the American market. It even cross-border between Canada and the United States, or cross-border between Mexico and the United States, there are these cultural nuances we have to understand. We have to have a literacy in how we communicate and get things done. There's the Hofstadter idea and power distances. And then there's also how do we address time differences? Are we, monochronic or polychronic? How do we do things from a time standpoint? Are we a checklist type of person, or we just kind of do whatever happens next? So chapter 9 in my book, which starts on page 115, talks about how we as leaders must be culturally literate. Now, I say leaders because that's where it starts. But in fact, what ends up happening is we create a whole culture within an organization of cultural literacy. And let me just say one other thing real quick, and then I'll turn it over to Dr. Bolzer. We, in an open organization and in the organizations I've studied, there's no such thing as political correctness. And I know that is a political hot button, and I'm not meaning to get in politics today, but what I want to say is this. I've asked organizations, how do you deal with individuals that may offend another individual from a different culture? And here's what they've said almost to the person. We're all adults here. We tell them to put on their big boy pants and the big girl pants and deal with it. If you're offended by something, you go to that person and say, hey, why did you say that? Help me understand. It didn't set right with me. I feel a little offended by it. Can we talk about it? And they usually work it out. Right. And it's really fascinating. So the cultural literacy part actually is a learning part. So really an open organization becomes a learning organization when it comes to that. Dr. Bolzer, you were going to say something.
Okay, this leads into, I'm glad you ended there, but Be More stated that, fear-based leadership is killing organizations. And I know the subject is in politics today, but we can see that happening in politics today. If we don't get a handle and embrace other cultures, not necessarily you have to agree with every culture, but embrace other cultures and state that it's okay to disagree, we're always going to have this fear-based leadership. Mm-hmm. And it's sad to say, but like you stated, in European countries, they have a little bit more better grasp on it than America. As soon as something looks different to us, we're fearful. Well, this is going to change. I don't like change. And so it also goes back to, are you flexible and willing to change? Mm-hmm. And to try something different. But I agree with Be More that fear-based leadership is definitely killing organizations. Westernized culture, the United States has to get a grip on not to be led by fear. And most of the time, fear is just change. And so we have to recognize what's fear and what's change and what's culture, and then learn how to proceed. If not, we are going to stifle our organizations. Mm-hmm. We're going to stifle growth, and we're not going to be able to become that melting pot or that progression for change, innovation, and development within our society. And that's a huge problem that we're seeing right now, even with the election that's going on.
And so, to your point, I speak often about this concept of cultural relativism. Mm-hmm. And I even talk about it in my book. Cultural relativism is this idea that we will defend our way of thinking, our culture, whether it's right or wrong, we're going to defend it. Now, no surprise to many people, I'm a Christian. I do a lot of work in Muslim countries and with individuals that ascribe to the Muslim faith. So does that put me at odds with them, or am I able to work with them? In the end of it, these individuals know I'm a Christian. They don't care. And I don't care that they're Muslim, because we're not there to discuss those hot topics. Mm-hmm. What we're there for is to agree that many times we may disagree on things, but we're going to focus on the things we agree upon. Yeah. Now, if I were to go into a Muslim country and try to proselytize from a Christian standpoint, I'm rubbing up against their cultural relativism. I'm attacking their way of thinking and their way of life to the core, and they will defend it. Now, we could argue that the defending in some ways is pretty terrible, when you deal with terrorism. But they could also be in the sense of very benign ways, where they won't work with you or talk to you, or they'll reject your work. And so cultural relativism is this idea of pushing back. Americans, I think, are the masters of cultural relativism. We defend things to the core. And so And in some ways, it might be a good thing. Like if you insult the American flag, I'm very patriotic. Maybe I will push back on that and say, wait a minute, why do you have to do that or whatever? We as Americans hate change overall. And yet we celebrate, big events, which are usually changing events. So anyhow, cultural relativism is really important to this discussion. And I think it needs to be understood at a deeper level in all areas, whether it be racial relations, race relations, or whatever. We need to understand how this impacts our cultural literacy.
I think one of the things as we talk about the open organization and we talk about culture and diversity, one of the things we need to talk about or we need to think about is the mindset of the people that we're working with. At the end of the day, it really boils down to, our ability to influence how other people think and approach whatever it is they're dealing with. When we're talking about fear-based leadership, we're talking about, the whole political scene that we're dealing with here in the United States and, the racial tension and a lot of the different things and really just this violent tendency. We're seeing all kinds of violent outbreaks all over the world. There was just 2 this week, one in Germany. There was one last night in Normandy. And there's all of this stuff that's going on. And it boils down to what's in the mind of the people who are behaving like this, what are they doing? What are they thinking? What's causing them to decide that this is the way for me to go? This is the response that I need to be doing right now. People are justified in what they do because in their mind, their perception is reality. Whether that reality is true or correct, it doesn't matter. When we were in, Karen, you might remember this, when we were in our, I think it was our last year of our cohort, or either our second year cohort, I think it was, we did a project dealing with culture. And our particular group dealt with the Cold Roundtables. And we looked at how, for instance, in Russia, they look at values differently. Honesty and integrity is very different. So they may say they value honesty, integrity on the same level, but in fact, they don't. One part of Russia may think it's okay to take bribes, and another part may think that it's not, but they still value honor and integrity. How is that possible? You're in the same nation, but you see the same value completely different. It's in the mindset. It's people feel justified in what they say, what they do, and how they perceive things. And the rest of us respond out of that perception. And so we tend to respond emotionally to certain things, particularly when it comes to diversity and culture, when we need to take more logical or as logical approaches as we can. That's why one of the conversations that Dr. Foster and I are having with a colleague on dealing with some of the things when it comes to diversity and trying to figure out, what we need to do to kind of help bridge the gap a little bit. And I think this is kind of a way that probably, like you said, Dr. Foster, the open organization will help, not just in this conversation, but also address skill gaps, these pay differentials and all of this. All of it boils down to, particularly when we have issues of inequality, which I hate, and injustice, we need to look at the open organization and the mindset of how can we open people's minds so that they don't perceive other people as threats or other people as lesser than, or whatever reason, whatever's ingrained in their mind as to why the decisions are made to maintain this inequality or these gaps, or why people have these skill gaps. Whereas I know there's a big push right now for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. But what about the arts and culture? Because we can't lose the arts and culture. But people who are very tech-minded, who are in STEM, they don't see the value in arts. Whereas those who are in arts and culture they see the value, but they don't get it because it boils down to left brain and right brain. But does it mean that one is better than the next or irrelevant? No, we need the total brain. And so it's just how we communicate it to where people can see the appreciation and value of the same brain, just two sides of the same of the coin. And so I think You know, that's where we have that conundrum and how we can get people to embrace the concept of the open organization and all of its, you know, how far we can use it. So that's going to lead me into my last question for today is, and I'm going to combine it, you know, what are the challenges of leading an open organization, and what are the recommendations that you have for leaders in an open organization that are facing some challenges?
Ooh, that is a 10-pound question for a 5-pound sack. So in my book, in chapter 3, I talk about an organization in San Francisco called GitHub. And GitHub is just one of hundreds of organizations out there that operate in an open setting. And one of the challenges that I witnessed there and in other places is simply how well we communicate with other people. In other words, do we communicate or not? And I will tell you that the whole essence of open is the dialogue, is the conversation. But the nuance in there is how we model things. And what I mean by that is a leader, how do we model what's appropriate behavior? And then how do we give that away to our followers? How do we instill it in them? And the key to that is coaching and mentoring. Now, if you want to be an effective leader, I strongly recommend you have a coach and a mentor, or maybe they're one and the same. I strongly recommend that you learn how to be a coach and a mentor. And I strongly recommend that you coach and mentor your organization on a daily, if not regular basis. That is so key. But the modeling comes through that coaching and mentoring. Coaching is drawing things out of people, helping them to be stronger in their areas of expertise and knowledge and abilities. Where mentoring is helping them to become more like you, where you're helping them to learn skills, and that's where the modeling comes in. That's actually the mentorship part, where you're modeling how to deal with racial tensions or diversity problems, or how do you handle a cultural literacy issue in a more effective way. And it's that hunger for growth and knowledge that we have to move to. STEM is a great thing. My kids are in school now. I look at STEM, but I also come from a background of the arts, music and you know, the visual arts. And so, you know, I'm kind of the whole brain person when I start thinking of that. We have to find ways to celebrate the whole person, not just the segment of them that comes to work every day and doesn't. And we didn't even touch, you know, flexible hours and balance of life and so many other things that are important to the open organization. We just scratched the surface today of that conversation. But the challenge is how well do we model to our team? Right. And modeling is embracing open, it's acting open, it's sharing, it's communicating, and above all, it's empowering. Right. It's saying you're the right person for the job. I could care less what color your skin is, what religion you are. I don't care if you're gay, straight, whatever. Forget all that stuff. You're a human being. How do we celebrate the whole person? Right. And stop getting caught up in that one sliver that we've hired them for? Because let's face it, we've hired them to do this little thing, but we get the whole package. The whole person comes to work. And if we don't, go ahead.
I'm hearing from you, Dr. Foster, it's more than about the work. It's about the entire body of the person. And as leaders, we have to recognize we might be hiring for a skill set, but we're receiving the whole person. And how do we deal with that as leaders? How do we cultivate that? How do we empower that? And how do we improve it as well? And so that's why I love the book, because it's just not about the job. It is about the person.
I think one of the things too, it's breaking through the labels.
Yes.
It's no longer saying you're the manager, you're this, you're that person, you're this. It's no longer labeling people based on a function. It's what can you, it's the whole pie. It's what you recognize that this person has value. and we're honoring everything about this person that brings value to what they do, because it's not just the skill or the knowledge that they have, but it's the personality that they infuse. It's the passion that they infuse into what they do that makes the organization a success. And so when we start talking about embracing the whole person, we're looking at who that person is beyond the label. Like you said, it's beyond gay, straight, black, white, male, female. It's beyond, Native American and Canadian. It's beyond left brain, right brain. It's beyond STEM and arts. It's celebrating, like you said, the entire person. It's who they are and the essence and the passion that they bring that infuses into the final product that they produce, whether you're a freelancer, a consultant, an employee of the organization, a contractor, it doesn't matter, laying aside those weights of labels that we put people in, because once you start labeling people, they're in this box and they permanently stay in this box. And that doesn't really work for the open organization, because if you're in a box, how are you open? Mm-hmm. And so it's just kind of, when we start thinking in that concept of let's tear down the barriers of what we put people in our minds and say, let's be open to the total person and everything that they have to offer. It will definitely change how we hire people, the whole interview process, everything about HR and just human relations and how we manage human capital overall fundamentally will change. And maybe we need to take a look at how Europe does it, because they are definitely ahead of the curve when it comes to stuff like this.
Yeah, and that's okay. I think that the biggest challenge, as you were talking, came to mind, and that is that we have to acknowledge our own biases.
Right.
And let's face it, we have them. I don't like to admit that I've got biases, but I do. Even though I say that I don't look at someone and see their ethnicity or whatever it is, the reality is somewhere within me, I am programmed to say, oh, they're different than I am. Mm-hmm. And so we all have biases, and they're ugly. And the question is, do we embrace those biases and hold on to them like a lover? Or do we say, you know what, that is not something that I want to be a part of. I acknowledge that it's a part of my history or my past. And in private conversations, Dr. Hughes, I've shared with you some of my family past. Right. The reality is we have to say, is that going to be a definition of who I am and who I'm going to be and what I'm going to be? Or am I going to acknowledge it and say that isn't going to be me anymore? And I'm not going to perpetuate that any longer. So that's a huge challenge, that we all have to be open and honest with ourselves about the ugliness within us.
Wow, absolutely. That's good stuff. I know you have to go, but we've had some great conversation here today about the open organization. It's available on Amazon. If you don't know what the book looks like, that's it. That's the second edition. It's a quick read, meaning the way Dr. Foster has it laid out, it's so easy. I'm enjoying it. I'm actually reading like 3 books at one time. I don't really do that. That's just how I do. I don't know. I just read 3 books all at once. It just happens. So I'm reading a little bit at a time. And I like
there is another book out there called The Open Organization. It's by Jim Whitehurst of Red Hat Company. It is a really good read as well. I'm an ambassador for the open org concept, and his book takes it from the standpoint of a CEO operating in that context. And I highly recommend that as well. Although I'd love to sell my books. Right. Jim has a great book as well.
Right. That's good stuff. Anybody else want to do give you some closing remarks before we end today? We're a little bit short on time today, but we've had some great conversation. We got to some good meaty stuff. We can also do a part 2 because there's so much more that we can talk about. And we've only, like you said earlier, Dr. Foster, we've only really just scratched the surface of dealing with the open organization. I would really like to see a conversation on how we can really apply the open organization to tackle some of the issues that we're dealing with when it comes to inequality and injustice, particularly on the social level, or even how people can use the open organization concept in their personal lives, particularly, especially nonprofits. I really believe that this is something that's that's very cutting edge. So I'm going to let you guys close it out.
Well, last word, I think that, by the way, Dr. Foster, I love your book and I think it's relevant to organizations today. And just one little quick blurb, we are moving towards open organizations. It's not going to be an option anymore. Yeah. And so if you are a leader, a manager, run your own business, please purchase his book. It's good to apply in any situation. But this is the way the future is moving in organizations and society. And hopefully we'll do a part 2 of the open organization. And so we can talk about some of the social injustices like Dr. Hughes was speaking about earlier. But I love your book and hopefully we'll have a part 2 in the next 2 weeks.
And you have a book too? Tell everybody.
My book is called The Christian Millennial Leading in a Secular World. It has some really great principles in that book. Whether you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, it's applicable to every organization. I will put a link up here to my author's site. So
it's you can check that
out. It is a must read. It's very interesting. And it's written by a millennial.
And so I'm still waiting on my signed copy.
Not boring.
Yeah, where's my signed copy?
My autographed copy.
You know what? I sent them all out today once BJ sent me this letter like, dude, you're slow.
So, Dr. Foster, do you have anything else you want to say?
Open organization is not just a corporate concept. It is a great concept that's being used by government agencies and not-for-profits and NGOs all around the world. It's not a fad. It is something that is growing, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. It is definitely a customizable type template. Again, you can find that book on Amazon. It's under the Open Organization. If you're interested in following me on Twitter, of course, I'm on Maximum Change. And if you go to YouTube, I do a lot of discussions on leadership under my channel, Maximum Change TV. So love to connect with you. Check me out online at MaximumChange.com and hope to hear from you.
Awesome. I'm Dr. LaTanya Hughes, the Authority in Global Business Dynamics. You can find me on Facebook under Dr. LaTanya Hughes. I'm also on YouTube under the same name. I also have a book called Pillars for Christian Mentoring. You do not have to be a Christian to follow those principles. So basically it outlines the different stages of the mentoring relationship so that you as the mentor as well as the protege can identify ways of understanding where you are, but also helps you identify whether or not you should even be engaging in a particular mentoring relationship. So it's also available on Amazon. And yeah, I'm also in the process of finishing up part 2, which is Pillars for Public Servants. We totally need it right now because I believe everybody who's a public servant really does need a mentor, but they need to understand how it applies to them in that context. So I'm really excited about that coming to a close, hopefully by the end of the summer. I'll be in the editing phase. So that's it for me. We'll see you all next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. We look forward to talking with you in 2 weeks. We don't know what the topic's going to be, but I think it's going to be good stuff.
It's going to be good.
Excited. So thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you guys. Have a good day.
All right.
All right. Recording's off. Thank you, guys.